I came back to Willow Crest in the summer of 2023, a 59-year-old man carrying the weight of loss. My wife, Emily, had fought cancer for years, and when she passed, it felt like the world stopped. I'd planned to settle into the old cabin my grandfather left me, tucked away in the Colorado foothills, to live quietly, maybe do some consulting for the Forest Service. But 47 minutes after pulling my truck into the driveway, that plan went up in smoke. Walking the western slope where I used to roam as a kid, I froze. A massive 3-story structure loomed where the ridge once stood, clear, a luxury retreat, all cedar beams, pine siding, and sprawling decks. It was a fire hazard begging for a spark, built right in what my grandfather called the death zone. As a retired fire chief with 32 years battling blazes, I could see it. Untreated timber, propane tanks against the wall, a fire pit 15 feet from the house. It was like someone had designed a bonfire and called it architecture. I was still processing when a woman approached, mid-40s, decked out in high-end yoga gear. "You're trespassing," she said, her voice sharp but polished, like she was used to shutting people down. Her name was Claire Evans, Wellness Director for Harmony Haven HOA. I kept my cool, though my heart was racing. "This is Willow Crest, my family's land for 60 years. She smirked, like I was some confused old man. "We have county approval. This retreat will bring healing to our community." Healing? That tinderbox would burn the valley to ash. I pointed out the cedar posts, the fire pit, the wind tunnel this ridge became in fire season. She brushed me off, saying their architects followed all codes. I pulled out my phone, snapping photos of the flammable nightmare, and asked about permits. Claire checked her smartwatch, like I was interrupting her meditation. "Our legal team has it covered. Please leave." Driving away, I couldn't shake the image of that cedar post catching fire when I tested it with my lighter, bright, fast, deadly. My grandfather died fighting a fire on this ridge in the 60s, protecting the valley below. The county had made it a wildfire buffer zone after that. How had they approved this? At the county office, the clerk handed me permits showing my brother, Daniel, who'd been dead since 2008, as the seller to Harmony Haven. My stomach sank. Daniel never owned Willow Crest. Grandpa left it to me. Someone had forged his name. I drove to see Rachel Carter, a lawyer recommended by my old fire department buddy, Tom Hayes. Rachel's office, in a creaky old Victorian in downtown Boulder, felt like a refuge. When I showed her the forged documents, she whistled. "This is fraud, Henry. Serious felonies." She dug into Harmony Haven's records, finding James Carver, their development director, a slick operator with a history of building wellness retreats in fire-prone areas. Then her phone rang. Carver's legal team, serving me a restraining order for threatening their staff. A sheriff's deputy arrived with the papers, claiming I'd harassed Claire and acted unhinged. Me, a fire chief with a spotless record. They were playing dirty and fast. The restraining order kept me off the retreat site, but I could still access my cabin. There, I found my grandfather's old military trunk, locked since his death. Inside were files, photos, and a 1963 Forest Service agreement declaring Willow Crest a permanent wildfire buffer zone. No commercial building was allowed without family consent. My grandfather had donated the land after a fire killed 14 people in a retreat just like this one. The photos showed charred ruins, lives lost to greed and bad design. This wasn't just fraud, it was a betrayal of his sacrifice. I tried working within the system. At a community meeting hosted by Claire, I showed a cedar sample catching fire in seconds. The crowd gasped, but Claire spun it, calling me a fearmonger. A security guard escorted me out as she preached about healing. The next day, a video of my demo went viral, captioned, "Crazed ex-fire chief torches retreat dreams." My cabin's power was cut, citing safety concerns. Anonymous notes called me a lunatic. One had a photo of my cabin with a bullseye drawn on it. Neighbors I'd saved from fires avoided me. The word arsonist was spray-painted on my truck. With the retreat's opening days away and red flag warnings forecasting dry winds, I couldn't wait for courts. I'd seen a fire like this in California, 12 dead, 3,000 acres gone. At 2 a.m., I made my choice. Borrowing gear from old fire crew buddies, I drove to the ridge. This wasn't vandalism, it was a controlled demolition to save lives. Body camera rolling, I soaked the ground to prevent sparks, then took an axe to the cedar posts, narrating their fire risk. By dawn, the retreat was a neat pile of salvageable wood. A young woman, one of Claire's followers, saw me and sobbed. "You're destroying our sanctuary." I explained the danger, but she called the cops. Claire arrived, tears streaming, screaming about her beautiful retreat. James Carver stepped from his SUV, his eyes promising ruin. "This is $1.8 million in damages, Mr. Thompson. You'll pay for this." The media pounced, branding me a mountain maniac. But Rachel had the 1963 agreement. At a packed courthouse hearing in August 2023, she displayed Daniel's death certificate next to the forged transfer proof of fraud. Then she projected the federal agreement, its seals undeniable. I took the stand in my fire chief uniform, showing photos of the 1963 fire's devastation, explaining how Carver's retreat mirrored it. Satellite imagery and weather data backed me up. That structure would have burned the valley. Federal agents crashed the hearing, announcing an investigation into Carver's company for violating wildfire laws. Tom Hayes testified, admitting commissioners forced him to approve unsafe permits for economic development. Then Carver took the stand. Under Rachel's grilling, he cracked, admitting his retreats were insured for more than their cost because bigger fires mean bigger payouts. The courtroom erupted. His confession, caught on camera, went viral. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain, I was the guy who stopped a massacre. Neighbors apologized. The crowd gave a standing ovation. 18 months later, in February 2025, I stood on Willow Crest at a new fire safety training center, funded by a $400,000 settlement from Harmony Haven. Carver got 8 years for fraud. Claire vanished to teach yoga somewhere. The county repealed shady development rules, and federal oversight now protects wildfire zones statewide. The center teaches kids and firefighters about fire risks, honoring my grandfather and the 1963 victims. Watching students learn where that death trap once stood, I felt Emily's words. Some fires clean the forest. My grandfather's fight lives on. But here's where it gets messy. Was I right to swing that axe, knowing I'd lose everything, my reputation, my community's trust? Or should I have let the courts grind on, risking lives? What would you do if your family's legacy was stolen and lives hung in the balance? Would you fight, even if it made you a pariah? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button if this hit home, and subscribe for more stories that make you think. Stay grounded.